let's start. Good day, everyone.
Good day. Good afternoon.
Welcome to the 2021 edition of the Dialogues. My name is Mattia Bianchi. I'm a professor at the House of Innovation of the Stockholm School of Economics. I'm also a co-director of the Garden Center for Design and Leadership. Here next to me standing is Roberto Verganti.
Ciao Mattia, good afternoon. Roberto Verganti from the House of Innovation.
So Roberto and I will facilitate the dialogue, and we'll walk you through its different contents and guests. We are at the Stockholm School of Economics, which according to Financial Times rankings is #1 business school in the Nordics. And our home is the House of Innovation, where we do research, we teach and disseminate knowledge about entrepreneurship, digitalization, development of new products, services, and business models. In this house, there's a garden, and in the garden, you will see Roberto having a cup of tea, Jennie, Riccardo, and myself. You will meet them this afternoon. At the garden, which is our Center for Design and Leadership, we believe that today the innovation challenge is very much a leadership challenge. It's about finding a new meaningful direction in a world that is overcrowded with ideas, options, and features. And we believe that design practice can support innovators as leaders by helping them searching for new meaning and bringing others on board to create this meaning. At the Garden, we run a flagship conference every year. That's the Dialogue. We open the door to the broader community, and we welcome business leaders, prominent experts from the civil society, policymakers, academics, to have conversations with us on themes that we believe to be timely and relevant. But also, we use the Dialogue to host a very important initiative for us, which is the Michal Scholarship. So today, at the end of the Dialogue, we're going to have the award ceremony, and the scholarship is really to award a talented design student who is going to work on business opportunities. Last year, in 2020, the Dialogue was about this paradox between human purpose and machine intelligence, and how design can help us integrating the two. So on one hand, the human values and aspirations help leaders finding new problems worth solving, and on the other hand, machine learning algorithms can help solve these problems in an efficient and an effective way. This year, we take a step forward and we talk about a concept named reframing. So what is it that we mean with the reframing, and why we believe it's relevant? Well, framing is a unique feature of the human mind. Computers are great at reasoning and calculus, but they don't frame. We do. So everything we perceive from reality, we apply a frame. We create a mental representation of that thing in our mind to structure, organize, and interpret these incoming perceptual stimuli and information. So frames are mental models, and like any model, they are selective in directing our attention. They act as lenses that spotlight some aspects, they put them in focus, and instead they leave other aspects outside of focus.
Yes, and in reality, Mattia, the concept of framing is not new. It's one of the fundament of the understanding of how the mind works. Why are we talking about this concept today, and what is this perspective that we are taking? Framing, first of all, is a concept that explains how we make decisions. And probably the first theories about framing come from decision making, and the example we are here now, the study of Kahneman and Tversky about cognitive biases, how we frame problem. Very simple example here. How do you see how much healthy is frozen yogurt depending is 20% fat of 80% fat free, and it's the same thing, but basically we frame the problem differently, and this and explain how we make decisions. But at the Ghana, we are interested in a house of innovation. We are interested in change, and there's a first way to see this characteristic of frame. So we don't talk about framing. We talk about reframing, which is what is the focus of our event. And the first thing to look at reframe is the concept of learning. Of course, after we see things, we experience things, and we do some action, and we see the result of these actions. We slowly understand things in a different way. We sometimes question the assumption that we used to take earlier decision. And this capability of not simply learning within certain assumption, but to question the basic fundament, the belief that we have when we take decision, this is called double loop learning, which is a phenomenon of reframing. So by changing assumption, we change the frame. And here we are already into the process of change. But as scholars and as a team interested in innovation, we are interested in reframing, so changing frame, as a deliberate act of innovation. So we are not simply retroactively or reactively changing a frame. We use a change of frame to create innovation. That was we are interested in. So we are interested in how do you create new solution by also changing the frame that you use to find solutions. So in this deliberate act is the curiosity that we want to discuss today, reframing as an act of innovation and design. Of course, we do this not only looking at how people think. We are in a school of business. Our curiosity is especially how this act happens in between people in organization, which makes it even more complicated. So this reflection we will do today will be connected to cognition, but a lot will be connected to how people interact when they are willing to change a frame in a project or in a design.
So we are in a context of innovation, and if we see innovation as creative problem solving, then frames are about how you see a problem, and reframing is about changing the way you see the problem using a different perspective that allows you to formulate the problem in an unconventional way, and this unconventional formulation of the problem will eventually lead you to very innovative solution path. So basically innovating the problem before you innovate the solution. Now, how do you go about reframing? The mainstream view is that reframing is about discovering new problems or new aspects of known problems. So these aspects are supposed to be out there. I'm not aware of them. And I need to try to discover them. So these aspects could be hidden user needs, jobs to be done, root causes, deep down the surface of behaviors and motivation. So I carry out ethnographic work, a job to be done analysis in order to try to unearth them and become finally aware of the core essence of the problem, because then I will reframe the problem around that core essence, and the solutions that I will come up with will be spot on. Let me give you quick examples from the literature. A pharma company aiming to help young people stop smoking. They discover that these smokers smoke not because of a chemical addiction to nicotine, but because they choose this lifestyle. Okay, so with this discovery, they basically reframe the problem from a medical one to a social one. How might we help them choose an alternative lifestyle, which suggested them solutions like offering coaching services, which of course are very different from improving the chemical formulation of Nicorette or the drug that they develop. Another example that is famous, the milkshake by McDonald's. McDonald's people eventually discovered that the job to be done for early bird customers of milkshakes is to keep them busy while they drive to work. And of course, they use this insight to reframe the problem, and so to come up with solutions that perform the job to be done better, like making the milkshake thicker. Of course, this has not changed the world, which is why at the garden, we are trying to develop an alternative perspective to reframing. Not a substitute of the former, but just different. Reframing as designing more meaningful problems. In this view, not just solutions, but also problems are something that can be created and invented, even in situations that are not necessarily perceived as bad, unwelcome, and negative. It's this attitude typical of designers to believe that any domain, be it a realm of human life or a product category, any domain, any point in time can be presents a gap between what is today and what might be tomorrow. And so it gives us the opportunity to make it more functional, with functionality broadly intended as betterment of human condition, which is something that can never be fully realized. So this creates a relentless number of opportunities.
So we're saying that we don't only design solutions, we design problems.
Yeah, we design problems, as you can see in the quote here, by making domains more functional through including an enlarging circle of concern for emotions, customer experiences, ethical behavior, environment, cultural norms, and aesthetic appeal. Okay, but exactly how do you enlarge it? Across which dimensions? Now, take the iPhone, and
No, come on. You're still using the example of the iPhone.
Yes, because it's one that everyone can relate to in 1 minute.
We take it in. We take it in. Okay.
So the iPhone was not developed to be a solution to the existing problems of the mobile phones of the time, the Nokias and the Motorolas. The iPhone expanded the functionality of mobile phones by injecting new needs into this specific domain, needs that were not perceived by users at that point in time, to the extent that the domain evolved from a dominant frame of just connecting people, I mean, just of connecting people, focused on that, to a domain of running your own life through a pocket-sized device. So this frame eventually created a number of problems that Apple solved by developing the iPhone. And so the iPhone proposed radically new experiences and meaning associated to this product category. What is actually designed here are frames that you impose on the problem to give it a new life. And these frames are the outcome of an imagination act, of envisioning in what way you could expand the functionality of that specific domain. So basically, it's these frames, as we know, they spotlight some dimensions instead of others, which basically suggested what kind of functionality, in what way you improve the functionality of that product category. So specify a direction, the nature of the what might be. What makes problems more meaningful? Well, they're more meaningful because they fit with the direction that the world is taking, macrodynamics in society, in economy, in technologies. And also it fits with the values of the innovator, the purpose. So if you take the iPhone, this new frame was not random. It was really a combination of the availability of better broadband networks, better technology for the display, for the camera, the emergence of platform models, and also Apple vision and identity as it transpired from previous products.
In reality, I mean, if I understand what we are saying here, I mean, I like the word frame because it's a little bit this metaphor of the glasses. So after decades in which we have been learning how to design solutions and how to design the things that are in front of our eyes, we understand that sometimes innovation comes because before diving into designing what is in front of our eyes, we first need to design the glasses that we use, the frame that we use to look at reality. Otherwise, we will never see what is in front of us. And why this challenge of using frame, or this opportunity to using frame as a source of innovation, is relevant today? Well, Mattia, you said it before. Frames are important because they create a fit now with how the world is changing, and we know that the world is changing significantly. I mean, and it's changing very, very rapidly. So in a world that is changing very rapidly, it's not unlikely that if we are not very careful, we end up solving problems that are problems of the past instead of the problems of the future. And the example of the recent pandemic is definitely that. I mean, the world has been changing so fast that if we reflect with the same frame that we had just a few months ago, we end up solving problem for a world that doesn't exist anymore. The second source of reframing, and the second reason why it's important to reframe today, we know new frames happen because we have new opportunities, new technologies emerging. And sometimes we tend to apply this technology a little bit linearly. I mean, we apply this technology to existing problems, but technologies are also enablers of new possibilities that we don't even see. Problem, the example of the iPhone, the touch screens, or we will discuss later with you about the blockchain and a way of looking at blockchain, or reframe how we look at blockchain, not just simply to solve existing problems, but to address opportunity that we didn't even think and imagine just a few years ago. Third, there is a third reason why reframing also today is very important, because what's happened is that the problem that we solved in the past acquire today new performance parameters, new expectation. The classic example is sustainability. I mean, if we address a problem in front of us, and suddenly we also have to consider a new parameter like sustainability, this incorporates a totally different kind of glasses. We need to change glasses, the way we look at reality. We had an example today of also how these new parameters can be considered. We'll talk about inclusion and diversity as an opportunity to reframe. Actually, we'll reframe the concept of diversity with one of the guests that we will have. So how people and how we see a diversity as a source of reframing. Also, what's happening nowadays, most of the problems we address are not specific problems that just have one user, but problems that have multiple stakeholders. A classic example by how designing a car changes if you think of a car like a product that is used by just a driver, or if we design as a car as a part of a mobility system. I mean, if you have a mobility system, then the stakeholders that interact with this is the driver, of course, but the pedestrian in the city, the policymakers, providing other services. And every time we add a new actors, a new player around, we need to reframe because there are new considerations to be taken in account rather than before. And finally, of course, there is a powerful way of reframe and reason why reframe, which is the emergence of a new wheel. I mean, it's totally different if we design a product to improve, I don't know, profitability of our organization, or if we want to make a heritage for the future, because my personal will is to make a landmark and an icon. And we know that nowadays, many executives are considering other wheels in the way they operate. They want to make leave a heritage in the world. They want to have a purpose. So this brings new opportunities to reframe.
Okay, let's get to action. This is the program and the schedule. We have 4 conversations with a gardener and a guest: Michal Gromek, Linda Zacharison, Carlamaria Tiburtini, and Elizabeth Christoforetti, from different sectors of the society with different backgrounds. And we're going to talk specifically about different drivers of reframing: the technological driver, as we talk about whether blockchain could offer an opportunity for system-wide reframing; the cultural driver, to understand how artists and cultural institutions can reframe today as they strongly hit by COVID, can reframe in order to remain relevant in our modern society. The human driver, neurodiversity, from being a disability, something that you try to, whose negative effects you try to mitigate, to being an opportunity, something that you can leverage through inclusivity. And finally, the design thinking driver as we reframe design thinking itself from user-centeredness to system-centeredness. Please share your insights on social media. These are the hashtags. Write questions and comments on the chat. We don't have a formal session for that. Maybe we have some time at the end of each dialogue or at the end of the afternoon. We'll see, but we want to hear from you in one way or another.
Fantastic. So we can start, and we have 4 gardeners today. There's me, I will be the last gardener. You're the first one, Mattia. We have 2 new members of the team, Jennie Fahlström and Riccardo Masiero will also be gardener today. But you are the first one to open the conversation dialogue, and you will start for something very interesting, which is technology as a driver of reframing. And we have a guest, Michal Gromek. Michal, you can come in and join us. Here you are. Welcome. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. And you will talk about the blockchain, which is one of the coolest subjects I can even think about this as a source of reframing. So I leave you for your dialogue, and we will see each other soon.
Yes. Welcome, Michal.
Good.
So
thank you so much for having me.
We know each other since 2016, I think, and he's the person I associate, or you're told, I'm sure. The first person I associate to fintech, and I think it's the first person I heard talking about blockchain in 2016. I was a bit late to that. Michal is a chief compliance officer at Saffello. Saffello is a leading cryptocurrency broker listed on NASDAQ and based in Sweden. Michal is also contributes to Forbes Europe with very insightful articles. Is the go-to person when it comes to digital assets and blockchain in the Swedish FinTech Association, and is very interested in fin crime, not committing, but combating fin crime. Yes, the dark side of fintech. And it's exactly this balanced profile that, you know, aware of the vulnerabilities of blockchain, but also excited about its potential that, you know, led me to invite you to this dialogue. So what's the logic? The logic is that with Roberto before, we were advancing the hypothesis that today we might be at the verge of a system-wide reframing. And one of the drivers of paradigm shifts is technology. Technology can help question ingrained assumptions and propose fundamentally new models. Now, not so many technologies in the history of mankind have actually contributed to a system-wide reframe. The last on the list is internet. So my question is blockchain the next in line, or is it not? So we're talking about a platform technology that offers decentralized value exchanges among interconnected users. Its characteristics are making transactions transparent, very visible, transaction costs being reduced by orders of magnitude, also times, and the network being designed to be virtually impossible to hack. The first application of blockchain, as you might know, dates back to 2009 and is the famous, for some infamous, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. When it comes to Bitcoin, clearly, the reframing is evident because Bitcoin reframes what money is and how it works, right? It breaks the givens and the assumptions that we typically associate to currency because it's a peer-to-peer system that is trustless. So economic transactions happen not because of trust, but through cryptographic work. They're peer-to-peer, so there is no a central authority that belongs to the state apparatus acting as a trusted third party, as it's the case for traditional currencies, like which are called fiat currencies.
Yes, the fiat currency.
Another key difference is the fact that they are in limited supply Bitcoin. There is only 21 million Bitcoins, and this, of course, makes Bitcoin inflation-free. Another key difference from traditional currencies that whose supply can be increased or, well, increased by central banks to stimulate growth, but also to stimulate inflation. Now, Michal, you've been in this arena for a long time. You have seen and heard just about everything. Do you think that the blockchain proposes an entirely new set of foundations for economic and social systems?
So thank you so much for having me, and it's my pleasure to join you today. It's interesting when you invited me, and then there's the question of reframing in relation to blockchain. But from my perspective, I think since 2015 or 16, I have been knocking at your door and saying, okay, this is finally a digital information technology. It's like an infrastructure. And then when we look at blockchain as an infrastructure for emerging markets, for the financial infrastructure, the non-financial infrastructure that we have been discussing, then it has completely the potential to change the way how we do things. But once again, I have accepted it in the same way like we have electricity, or we have the phone, or we have railroads. I just accepted blockchain as one of the infrastructures. And then it's easier to talk about that and then to frame it into something that individuals can relate to.
So, Michal, you've been working firsthand on an initiative that has used blockchain to basically reframe investigation by the police of criminal activity, yes. How you visualize criminal activity. So we typically associate, it's common to associate blockchain because of its anonymity to committing illegal behaviors. But here it seems like blockchain can be part of the solution rather than of the problem. Can you tell us more about this initiative?
I think totally, but then one of my ideas was to bring you the slides to first explain a little bit the concept of blockchain per se, because these are those concepts which are sometimes being confused. So it's interesting that there is a complete different perception, linguistically speaking, when somebody presents me as a cryptocurrency expert, and then there is a perception when somebody presents me as a blockchain expert. So then there is a very interesting naming and beckoning logic behind that. So, but just a little bit to paraphrase what you said, it does sound very abstract usually when we say that blockchain is a trustless network and currencies are being so the transactions are being confirmed on the blockchain, on the internet. But as of today, when you are swiping your cards and you did the purchases, you did the groceries yesterday, then literally what is keeping track of your entire expenses is your bank. So when you basically slide your card, then there is a notification to your bank that says if you have enough money on your account and you can purchase that. And in case you do have, then of course the bank is keeping a ledger. The bank is keeping like an Excel file, and in this Excel file we can see all of the different transactions. So it's once you send money between different individuals, then of course this is how the financial system works. We are very thankful for the banks that they have been working for a long time period with some of the bumps lately. And then when you use the same logic, so instead of having the bank and then the central bank confirming it, to actually have a system confirming, and what is not that different because of the currency, nobody at the bank is literally sitting there and checking if you bought your stuff on Lidl or you didn't. Then this is actually how cryptocurrencies on blockchain are functioning per se. So and in the same way, like we have the introduction of electricity. So electricity would not be possible when we would not be able to have manufactured all of the items needed to create electricity. Phones and the phone infrastructure would not be possible without electricity. And then there's an entire pathway why blockchain has emerged now and has not happened 50, 100, 200 years ago, because we needed all of the different technologies in between. We needed to be connected to the internet. We needed to understand the concept of the internet. And then so blockchain for me is an evolution of the digitalization of trust. And we talked about it. It sounds very abstract for those of you when we speak about the evolution of the digitalization of trust. Just please try to reflect the last time or the first time when you have been purchasing anything online in your life. When you are a bit older, then you purchased stuff out of a catalog. As I lived in Germany, there was the catalogs. Otherwise, you have been purchasing and paying at the postal service, and after you open this particular package. So then there was an entire evolution of trust. And then when I ask my grandparents if they trust certain items, and then they referred me to the wash machine and they say, I trust that the wash machine is made well, so it will not break. When we ask the younger generation, if they trust technology, they are more comfortable. So research indicates that they are more comfortable meeting online and speaking to each other online before they actually meet in person. There's a fundamental shift, the reframing in the digitalization of trust, what actually has allowed us and allowed the society for the blockchain concept to emerge. I think there are two additional clarifications. One on what is pseudo-anonymous, and then on the other side, what is why do we need blockchain in the first place at all, right? Maybe we can just have databases and just get rid of blockchain per se. And then we can just jump to the question, the aspect of pseudo-anonymous. I will now make an analogy, which is not perfect. If possible, please do not quote me publicly on that. But then the idea of cryptocurrency wallets is that you send money to a long abbreviations of letters and numbers. So it is not very easy to understand who receives those particular letters. So who receives this particular transaction. But this is very similar to your credit card. Because when you take out your credit card and you give me your credit card number without giving me your name, at the beginning I will not really know who you are, because slowly I'm trying to get to the investigations on the blockchain, right?
Yeah.
I don't really know I would not know who you are, but then based on a number I can reach out to Visa and MasterCard at first. They would know which bank has issued this particular card, and then this bank would literally know who you are. So then there is so this is pseudo-anonymous because only based on the number, I don't really know your identity. Similarly to when you have my cryptocurrency wallet address, you will not really know who I am per se. But then there are institutions that you can connect you to a valid KYC, so then to valid bank ID. And this is the concept of cryptocurrency and pseudo-anonymous currencies like Bitcoin and blockchain, Bitcoin and Ether. And this analogy has a couple of flaws, because usually when you take the credit card number, then you literally know that the last numbers are Visa or MasterCard and the beginning numbers are the country that the currency is issued. As you can see, certain numbers associated with the banks. It's a little bit more difficult from a blockchain and from a Bitcoin perspective, but it is still doable to connect you to a financial institution that has your KYC per se. And then the last analogy to reaching solutions with new tools is like, why do we need blockchain? And then these are all of those paradigm shifts that we had within the last years, right? So historically, my grandparents have bought the Britannica encyclopedia, and then now we are using Wikipedia per se. So it is a shift of we would like to fulfill we have the need to look up terms in a very effective way. But now, as we have the internet, it doesn't make sense to come back to Britannica, and it's not being printed anymore for the last 10 years, potentially. And we'd use this, so we use Wikipedia. And that's a little bit the analogy, what we can suddenly do with blockchain. It was not done before. It was not possible for us to introduce new terms to Britannica, because then we had to submit that. It had to be reviewed and printed. Here, the logic is exactly the same as the logic with the internet. And then to the, so I think once we grasp both of the concept of being pseudo-anonymous and reaching those tools, then we can a little bit speak about the cryptocurrency investigations per se. Because here, it's very easy to talk about cryptocurrencies and just push them into the corner and say, what would happen in case we would just get rid of all of them? Then potentially crime will still exist. What is possible with those articles that have been released, and I think the latest one was like released last week, this one in the middle, is then suddenly with blockchain, as blockchain remembers everything forever, you are able to visualize and see how the transactions of the users have taken place after they have done those transactions, 10 years after, 20 years after. So when a user has sent the money to another cryptocurrency wallet, and from this wallet to a wallet that is associated with a darknet market, literally there is a notification that is being sent back to the providers, and it is possible for the police to trace that. Speaking on one of the example that has been released last week, and there was a wave of love and a little bit of a wave of hate. It's connected with IPTV, so it's intellectual. It's IP, so it's Internet Protocol Television, where I have been able to trace around 650,000 transactions on the blockchain, and it's visible that those transactions are going to 1,200 resellers. and those resellers are actually getting their supplies from decoders, so from organized crime that is deconstructing satellite image. And finally, or like now, this is the first time that it was visible ever. Because historically, it was just impossible to see that individuals made those transactions. But now, when you just can click on the visualization of them, then we will see how those transactions look like in practice, right? So it is visible, and suddenly cryptocurrencies are part of the solution, and blockchain is a part of the solution. We just have to find a way for the police, law enforcement, and prosecutors, as well as for the society per se, to be able to read what I'm sending to them. A long explanation, right? So,
but very exhaustive. But I want to leave finance because, you know, of course, there are many more applications of blockchain under the umbrella of the decentralized finance, yes. the DeFi, yes. Beyond cryptocurrencies. But we really I want to understand with you, take the opportunity, since you're here, to see whether blockchain has the opportunity to reframe also in many other industries, because the number of projects based on blockchain is huge and growing very fast, vertically and horizontally across many domains. Internet of Things, energy, gaming, government, what else? Logistics. Yeah. So some of these applications, I think, are quite evolutionary. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think blockchain can really offer radical improvements of performance, but I say evolutionary because it's really on the same trajectory, a kind of a meeting better performance criteria that are established, have been there for some time. If you take logistics, blockchain can strongly enhance visibility, transparency, the ability to track the movement of goods, knew how to reach long-established whys. The uses of blockchain that are more interesting for me are those that are revolutionary. Mm-hmm. They basically redefine the parameters of what is good and bad. They expand the functionality of a domain, you know, linking back of what I said at the beginning of the dialogue. So injecting new performance criteria. So, I mean, if you take, you know, NFTs, non-fungible tokens in the art domain that are being exchanged for crazy amounts, it's hard for us to understand what they are for. They don't make a lot of sense, and maybe that's a strong signal why there is a reframing, right? Yes. So I wondered, is this a revolutionary use of blockchain? Let me make another example until I really want to listen from you about this possibility for reframing across many different industries. The other one is Web 3.0, right? So in Web 1.0, users were just passively consuming content that was there. In Web 2.0, users can actively create new content on networks that are owned by big companies. Web 3.0 with blockchain, finally, users can own part of the network. They can directly have a stake on the network, which is represented by the crypto assets they hold. They can also make decisions about how the network develops. And this kind of application, you can see it, for example, when it comes to mobile connection. There is a project called War Mobile, where basically networks of users manage to bring internet in distant remote places in Africa that are completely uneconomic for big operators. Or in Canada, users basically produce power from their solar panels or their storage batteries. I mean, they make it available, they put it in the grid so other users can charge their cars in peak hours. So again, reframing, because here users are actually the owners of the network rather than just users.
Yes. Plenty of topics at the same time, right? So I think technology, NFTs, Web 3.0. Maybe on a macro level, somehow we got used to the fact that technologies have been appealing as in some kind of a singular setup. Suddenly we have the phone network, suddenly we have the internet network. Now there's a time period where all of those technologies which are emerging, they are interdependent and interrelated. What you refer to, I think, let's start with word mobile. So then the idea that individuals who have a little bit more capital, they can create like a mobile phone network. They literally, when there is electricity, they purchase a modem, then they purchase some kind of a Wi-Fi similar router, and then whoever is using this particular network, then of course then they do pay for the mobile network provider, and then those providers that have actually financed the router in the first place, they receive some kind of a cut. What means that suddenly we are bringing decentralization into the mobile network, which would be impossible, right? I have a slide on helium. So helium is a long-range router network. This is a map of Stockholm. So then there is an idea, there is Wi-Fi, and then there's the Internet of Things, where now on my daughter's stroller there is like a small device which is connected to the helium network. When you have your boat, when you have your kayak, there's a small device is connected on a helium network. It does cost you around 500 US to have like a helium router, and then you basically stream like a long-range Wi-Fi. And then depending where you are, if they are, as you can now see the map of Stockholm, if what is the usage of those different products, you actually get a cut back. So I have friends who are now making $600-700 US a month, and they purchase this router for 500 US, right? So you make permanently profit. But when you drill down to the logic, your initial point of the technology, suddenly then bringing decentralization into the telcos. Here we are now creating our own 5G, right? We are owning the 5G, and cryptocurrencies are just a mean to get the money from the helium network or from wordmobile.io that can be paid out to your wallet, that you can just cash out to the Swedish krona, to euro, and then to everything else, right? So then what emails and Gmails are, and Gmail and Yahoo are to the internet, are cryptocurrencies to the blockchain network. And now when everything is coming together, and this will come together with Web 3.0, it's coming together. For those of you who have watched the announcement of Facebook, true or not, what they are planning, of course, and we'll see that this will merge together with virtual reality, right? So here, this is the trick. This is the trick here, and then somebody will have to get compensated for the entire design that they have done. And then maybe for finishing off a little bit with NFTs and coming back one slide. This is the first tweet that has been released ever by the founder of Twitter, and now by the end of March, it has been sold for, now I have to make up numbers, I think $2.5 million US, $2.9 million US.
This tweet.
Correct. So here, because you will be speaking about art, right? Suddenly we see that the blockchain technology and the cryptocurrency technology is then interacting with art, and it's redefining and reframing what we define as value. Maybe somebody will do a print screen of our conversation, would like to sell it. Then of course the question is who would be the buyer of it, right? Maybe this is the first session on blockchain in the studio, right? And this is something that we actually have not seen before. And we have problems to deal with that because we apply like an old software and like an old version of looking at technologies. Because
frames.
Yes, because what else should we do? Being a chief compliance officer of a cryptocurrency company which is traded on NASDAQ, when users are sending, for example, when they have mined helium, right? They have now mined, they have received money from Word Mobile of mining helium. I have to apply laws that have been created in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in order to process those payments, right? Because they cannot be connected to money laundering. There's a long list of those different requirements, and I'm happy to do it. But it really feels like you will be judging a fax or an email by the letter, by the legislation which is regulating the postal service, right? Which is not the same, which is very difficult.
Yeah. So we can conclude with kind of this last comment and maybe question to you, Michal, and it connects a bit to what you have just said now, because I mean, you have given inspired examples and information, but you can only do so much. I mean, you're a human too.
I can always do more.
Yeah, I mean, you're not Elon Musk. So
not yet. It's coming.
So what I mean with that is that the more revolutionary uses of a technology like blockchain are maybe those that we can't imagine right now. And it's probably similar to what happened with the internet a couple of decades ago. The internet came with its own primordial frames, and of course the one of communication, a technology that helps communicating for better communications. And so the initial applications of the internet, like sending emails, were rather straightforward, or at least in retrospect. But who would have predicted things like Facebook or YouTube to be the groundbreaking uses of the web? And that's because these uses were associated to a novel frame associated to the web, socialization, that was not there at the beginning. So to some extent, the technology itself was reframed by the vision and the action of visionary leaders. Will we see the same for blockchain? So what I mean, will this be the reframing that eventually we get by seeing killer apps based on new frames of blockchain that we can't really imagine right now? Now we know that blockchain comes with decentralization, with community, but maybe there are more frames that can be applied to blockchain that eventually can suggest new applications, those that will do the reframe.
Yes, and there has been already a fundamental shift, because then historically speaking, always the legislation and regulation was lagging behind, right? So first there was the technology, and then we had to figure out if this technology is safe or not, and then there was regulation coming. Now, on behalf of the Swedish FinTech Association, there's a cooperation with the Ministry of Finance. There's a new DLT, so it's like a blockchain-based regulation that's supposed to be coming up, but is actually trying to predict what could come up. And this is the first time, because then the regulation is trying to leave a little bit some kind of an open space for different technologies to emerge. As now there is an anticipation that, okay, cryptocurrencies are new. They are not new. They've been here since 2009. Wi-Fi, or smartphones have been there for a short to long amount of time. And so now we see that the amount of complexity and the amount of how interrelated, interdependent those technologies are, it will just increase. And for those of you who have remembered the modem time period, right? When you blocked the network and it made a ding, and it just stopped. And then you booked 500 minutes for like a month to a ridiculous price. Exactly as you said, there was no way on earth we could have predicted social media. We could predict it LinkedIn. We could predict it that there would be a possibility for us to meet with all of you today. So it's very difficult, and I think it's impossible from a human nature to sit down and then try to predict what would come up. We just have to maybe try to follow the different structures and learn from the technologies that we have already implemented.
But someone did. I mean, someone managed to imagine and envision this.
Yes, and then potentially these are those individuals which are running those important companies that you have referred to,
running
not
the
us yet, right? So I think this is our responsibility to do a little bit of scenario planning, not be afraid, and try to look for answers. And yes, there are moments when I have to go to the restroom and bang my head against the door, because you have this old regulation that you have to apply on new technology, but then there are a lot of common sense people who are actually bringing our societies forward. So I hope that when I will knock on your doors, then you will give me more than 10 minutes to explain where the technology is going.
Thank you, Michal, for being with us. Roberto is.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michal, and it's fantastic. I mean, I've been learning a lot. And now we will move to a new subject. Which is apparently far from
connected,
but it's extremely connected. So it's no one will ever believe that technology and art would have been so connected as they are in this moment. So, Mattia, I welcome. First of all, I welcome Jennie, who is a new member of our team. Welcome, Jennie. Jennie is taking a PhD at the House of Innovation at the Garden, interested in art. Where do you come from?
Where I come from? I've been working some 20 years in the contemporary art field before doing my MBA here at SSC, and now starting the PhD journey.
Fantastic. So we will talk about art as how you reframe art. And actually what we saw just before, it's something dramatically important happening in this moment. Things that could never have been sold before, digital art now start to have a value, which is something totally unexpected. We're thinking about, how do you reframe the meaning of ownership?
Yeah, that's what NFT does.
So it's a very, very interesting. And to talk about art and the challenges of art in a very difficult moment like the moment that we have now, I welcome Linda Zacharison. I hope I pronounce your name very well. Welcome, Linda.
Welcome, Linda.
Hi.
And Mattia, I will join you soon. So, Linda, you've been chairing the inquiry of the Swedish government on the restart of the art and culture. This event is about Reframe to Restart. So I'm very curious to hear that it is a very difficult moment. So I would like to discuss about this and how we reframe. I will help you also to be more visible, so we can stop sharing the screen and you have the entire floor with you. We'll see each other soon.
Thank you, Roberto.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and so happy to be here today with you, Linda Zacharison, and you have just completed and presented this extensive report that we see here in the, can you see it? Yes. Mm-hmm. So, which is the restart on the arts and culture in Sweden. And you were assigned the job as the chair of the committee to start this work, assigned by the Swedish government in December 2020. And you handed over this report to the Minister of Culture in late September this year. So during a year and a half, you have been working extensively to understand the consequences of the pandemic in the arts and cultural field and the ways forward for this quite large field that you have covered during this very short period. Mm. But before chairing this committee, you have been working quite a lot in different spheres in the cultural area. So between 2015 and 20, you were the cultural counselor of Sweden in the United States, based in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. So 5 years there. And before that, you've been working 17 years at the big venue, Kulturhuset Stadsteatern in Stockholm, in different positions, in different areas as artistic director, correct?
Within the performing arts.
Within the performing arts. And you have also served as the political advisor to the Minister of Culture and Education in Sweden during a 3-year period, 2003 to 2006. And prior to that, you've been the director at the Swedish Film Institute for distribution issues in Sweden and internationally. And you've also held a position as CEO of Cirkus Cirkör, which is a contemporary circus organization.
Company, yeah.
Company based in Sweden, but with a huge outreach internationally. So with this wealth of knowledge and experience, I am very curious, as well as your immense effort for this report, which I've understood along the way when we've talked, to hear about your experiences along the way of understanding the effect of the pandemic in the cultural and art field. And as we all know, the artists and cultural organizations, they have long before the pandemic struggled quite a lot to find financial means for their activities. It's been hard in the cultural sphere already. And then when the pandemic hit, it became extremely hard for many in the industry. And we will talk about this work, how you have sort of uncovered what has happened. But I want to ask you firstly, how do you even start a report like this? What is it when you come to the Swedish government and initiate or take on this job as the chair?
Thanks for that introduction. Yes, well, it was my first time also to chair a job like this. So I did not really know how to go about, but since the mission was to try to catch and describe a situation while it was going on, I instinctively felt that we needed to use the dialogue as a tool all through the work as much as possible. Because what we were supposed to do was to try to describe the consequences of the whole artistic field, from all the genres, from performing arts to literature to museums to non-profit organizations and commercial organizations and to freelancers all across Sweden, yes. And to describe it also on a national and regional and local level. And of course, come up with suggestion of what's needed, what kind of support and initiatives are needed to restart and rebuild and recover the arts and cultural sector. So what we did from the start was to reach out digitally mostly and ask the whole sector to speak to us, to describe their situation, to describe their challenges, and to tell us what was needed. And we named the inquiry Från kris till kraft, from crisis to empowerment, maybe you can say, because almost every conversation we had was like moving in between despair and hope, and constructive ideas and analysis, but also loss and worries. And I mean, a big part of the sector also left their jobs, especially as artists, or was thinking of leaving and going and just letting go. So it was a kind of a therapeutic work at the same time. And we actually had about 300 conversations during those 7 months that we worked with both unions and organizations and institutions and individuals, because we wanted to have like a big choir of voices coming to get their speaker through this work. So that's what we did. And then we had an expert group of 11 experts from the sector, from different parts of the sector, to read and come back with their comments on our work all the time, and see through that we were going in the right direction, of course.
Yeah. So when you then, as a very short summary of this 1.5 years, what were the most obvious findings of the consequences of the pandemic, would you say?
Well, it was of course a hard economic hit. I mean, especially for all the businesses that were dependent on having audiences and live audiences. So huge losses of revenue and lost commissions and bookings, and also then as a consequence of that, loss of expertise and competence within the organizations and within the sector at all, and also losing the relation to the audiences in many cases. And we could also see very early on that it hit especially hard on the freelancing sector, on the independent sector that was not connected to the big institutions of Sweden, where there was kind of security still.
And the time from when you could start sort of applying for the early financial aid programs, what did people do in that time in between? How could they handle the initial crisis period?
Well, actually, in Sweden, it worked pretty well in comparison to, I mean, it was a much harder situation in the US where I was living the first 6 months of the pandemic before moving back to Sweden and starting this work a couple of months later. So, but many had to, you know, survive through friends and family, or take other jobs, or, I mean, find all kinds of help.
Yes.
But then there was a big effort from the state, especially of providing crisis support to individual artists and also to organizations. So that was well-handled, actually, and they also updated the systems along the way several times when there were glitches. They tried to rework it and redefine it along the way. So it was a huge learning process, I would say, also for the public authorities in Sweden, for the politicians, for the civil servants within the cultural policy sector, actually, on seeing the whole ecosystem and how interdependent it is, the commercial parts of the arts and culture, which is not always in such close dialogue with the government, for example, but now was, and also how that co-works with the non-profit center and the institutions.
Yes. And then when you went through sort of what is needed, because this is a proposal now, this report that is being considered by the Ministry of Culture, and we will get some kind of complete reply in February. But as you propose 3.9 billion Swedish kronors for the years 2022 to 24, so that's 3 years. And then there's a slight decrease in the governmental support from the years on 24 and onwards. Could you explain sort of the sum? Is that a huge sum when it comes to governmental support for this industry?
Well, during 2020 and 2021, there was crisis support, as I mentioned, that was almost up to 6 billion Swedish kronor. So the needs are huge. Yes. And I mean, as you said, this is suggestions, but already, which is very rewarding for us and that we're very happy about, is that in the budget for 2022, the government decided to confirm support for the restart and the development of the arts and culture sector of 745 million that we propose here. Okay. So that will already happen. And then, I mean, that we wanted to strengthen a long-term investment, that it's not only enough with restarting in a short period of time. The consequences will be going on. We will see them for a couple of years. Yes. And the risk taking is lower with all the organization, and the audiences is not returning immediately. And we see that the pandemic is not over yet. So that was the point of having this long-term perspective. But we hope, of course, that in 2024, the audiences will have returned and everything is rolling again and working. But we still found that there was a need for permanent support for example, increased arts in the school. So that was one of the things that we suggested, long-term support also onwards.
Thank you. And moving on in the report, you also one of your missions was to find the new ways of making art and reaching out to audience. And digitalization comes as one clear object during the pandemic. How did it work with the digitalization of the art field, the cultural field? Were some better than others?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, it exploded. It accelerated in a extremely high pace. And some parts of the arts were already on it and already flying. And we all know, you know, the audiobooks boomed, and Netflix and the other like giants had increasing viewers and so on. Yeah. So I think that the hardest shift was for the performing arts. Yes. That was used to live audiences and had to rethink and reimagine how they would keep in touch with their audiences. And there were lots of trials and errors, of course, and a huge learning process there too, where also sectors started to communicate with each other and looking at each other. But also what I would like to address were also like very analog ways of reaching out in combination with the digital way of working. Like the libraries, for example, like they did very service-oriented like book bags for their communities, where you could tell what books you like, and then a librarian put together a selected
sort of COVID package.
Yeah, a COVID package for people. And also many performers went out. They started performing outside. They started like doing opening galleries or dance performances in the forest or in the open squares of a city, or reaching out to elderly people in a nursing home, for example. And I hope that we can keep those initiatives of like really trying to create new and very close relationships. But it was also a way where many artists opened up for an even more closer and almost intimate dialogue with their fans, like starting to record concerts or streaming rehearsals from their living rooms or bedrooms, or like Robin, for example, she created like parties, like digital clubbing events for her fans, and the classical music scene also developed many new ways of reaching out and growing their audiences in extensive ways.
So I've also seen many examples of this intimate connection with your one-to-one fan or so. That has been a great memory for many during the pandemic.
But there was also many challenges, and there are many challenges still. I mean, both on the technical side, but mostly on the business model side. So when it comes to classical concerts, we learned that, for example, the Berliner Philharmonics, which are one of the most popular concert arrangers for digital concerts, but they still don't get it even. I mean, it's not a business model that really works yet.
No.
And also many of the content providers, like the artists who were producing the content, didn't get paid enough.
No.
So there's a lot to do. There's work to do. Yes, absolutely.
Yes. And if we would then, from your experience of doing this work that was pressed in this very short period, when you've done it now, what were the biggest surprises along the way? Was there one special, or was there something you couldn't anticipate when you started it?
Well, what was I think since it was so obvious that a lot that was problematic or challenging even before the pandemic was like got a spotlight on it in the situation. So a lot of the things we found was not surprising at all. It was just clear. It was just obvious.
Yes.
You know.
Give me one example.
Well, for example, how bad the economic conditions are for an artist, and how segregated the arts world still is. How we don't reach out, how the arts scene don't reach out to all audiences of Sweden, even if everyone is paying for it, for example. There were many things like that. But what was surprising in a good way, and also giving a lot of hope, was how people came together in solidarity, in a way of sharing experiences, and also working together to tell their story, to tell and formulate their needs, and also that competitors came together, like private theaters, private run commercial theaters, for example, came together and started working on, how to make their field more sustainable, both economically and in other ways.
So it was a broader sort of creative partnership happening?
Yes. Yeah, and learning, like both vertical and horizontal learning processes going on everywhere. And I think that it's still that way. I mean, since we presented this report a couple of months ago now, I've been having talks like every second day, because the sector is also, I mean, they feel a threat, but they also feel like a moment and a momentum, I think, of telling how important they are. And a lot of people outside of the arts also noticed live arts and culture when it wasn't there anymore.
Yes.
And how much they needed it. And also there were so big changes in society of like working from home and retail businesses leaving central cities and so on, because we all buy online.
Yeah.
So I mean, there is an increasing need of people to come together and of meeting places and of experiences where the arts are unprecedented. I mean, it's a perfect way of bringing people together from different kinds, different parts of society. And we need to show that again, and everyone are eager to.
And have there then been sort of new ways for the arts and cultural field to phrase it in a new way, to reframe the sort of usual expectation that culture is needed and so important in a society? Have there been new ways of showing this importance during the pandemic?
Yes, and new dialogues also with like urban planning or tourism or businesses. I mean, and the business community that I think they have broadened their dialogue partners.
Yes.
And I think that also more parts of society has seen this need, and it's growing, it's developing all over. And it's also very connected to the other big shift of like, how can we work more sustainable? Because another thing that stopped completely almost in the arts was the international exchange of ideas of people, and we need to get that back, but we need to do it in a new way. So we have to reimagine how we work with international collaborations, and that's also in a hybrid growing process right now, where we don't have all the models, but we're exploring them.
So there is also some work to be sort of developed along that way. As a final conclusion, while we sort of wait for this governmental decision on your proposal and the hard work you've done with the report, I am taking the chance to also go back a little bit to the reframing as a theme of today. And when we sort of as citizens in a society, we expect the culture to be there, as you said, and when it's not, we really sort of lack it, and we need the concerts, the theaters, the exhibitions. And then when we can't sort of go to them as usual or share them with our friends or community, we cannot just rely on the government to fix this area for us. So therefore, I would like to ask the question, what can we do as sort of citizens for the art field, for the cultural field? How can we help the artists do their work?
Well, of course, through buying books and products and tickets or gift cards for theaters, if you want to take it easy a little bit more, but also to express their need, and also I think to influence the people around us to take part in the arts, and our children and the young people around us. I mean, we really saw, and a lot of people in the sector described a worry that they lost touch with many of the kids and many of the young people, especially kids from families where the parents are not bringing arts to the home. So that's one important question for the future, I think, to create like future art lovers.
Sounds great, and sounds very good as a final mark for this dialogue. Thank you so much, Linda Zacharison, for sharing your knowledge and experience about this field, and welcome Roberto into the studio again.
Fantastic. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
It's very inspiring. I mean, it's during pandemic, everyone have been wondering what is the future of art, and actually technology is a great opportunity in this case. So sometimes I wonder what's the meaning of a concert when everything becomes digital. So
everything won't become digital.
everything won't become.
No.
So I mean, probably we're just at the beginning. We still need to discover what will happen.
Exactly.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Jennie, you can stay with me because we announced a little break now, but I wanted to go back to our screen here. Maybe we can share just to explain a little bit. There is an image here which we've been choosing carefully after hours and hours and hours of reflection. And this image actually comes from a work of art.
Yes.
Which is a digital work of art.
Yes, it's a video work by Christine Ödlund.
Thank you for saying you said it.
Yeah. She is a great artist who actually then exhibited this work here at Stockholm School of Economics a couple of years ago. The work is called Cryptogamy, and it was made in 2016. And we thought it was very important to have a work of art that has been presented here through the art initiative at SSE, and also to find an image that was the still of a fern, ormbunke in Swedish, and how it sort of develops. She has made a work of art where it is 900 times faster than usual when this fern is opening up its leaves. So we thought it was a good idea to have this as a metaphor for this dialogue session of how we are opening up the different.
And we have been trying some experiment by using art in our course this year. And for those who don't know, the Stockholm School of Economics has a very important art initiative. So exploring the interconnection between art, leadership, and business. And if the question you may have is why exactly this frame connected to our reframing exercise? Well, the answer is we may have some hypothesis, we don't know, but this is up to you. So actually what it was very interesting in our experiment we did in class is that sometimes art forces you to think and forces you to find connection where you will not find them. So you can take this image and find your own inspiration and why do you find this is important for you, because it forces your mind to unblock some system that we typically stay within.
And not just the mind, but also what you feel when you see something.
Which is
I
art.
think it's very important.
Very, very important. So now we stop here for just 10 minutes to relax so you can stretch. In Sweden, we have the tradition of taking a coffee in mid-afternoon. So we will go and take a coffee and come back and reconnect in just 10 minutes. So I would say at 3:27 for those who are in Central European time. Okay, so 10 minutes and we will be back. See you soon. Okay, welcome back and welcome to the dialogues at the garden. We are discussing about how our new context is forcing us to and inviting us to define problems in new ways and using framing as a source of innovation. We have been discussing about technology as a source for reframing. We have been discussing about art as a source of reframing, and we can now continue in our program that you see here. We will have two more reflections about how we can reframe problem. First one is how the way we look at people and especially diversity and inclusion can be a source of framing our context in new ways. And then we will talk about design as a source of innovating through the redesign of frames. To talk about the first subject, I welcome Riccardo Masiero. Riccardo, excuse me.
Thank you, Roberto, for the introduction.
You're increasing the community of Italians at the garden. So where do you come from?
I'm come from Verona, Italy, and I just finished my master in space engineering at Politecnico di Milano, so a technical school, but I'm not here as a first-year PhD student at Stockholm School of Economics and the garden.
Fantastic. And you will be the gardener, and we will have a guest. And the guest is Carlamaria Tiburtini. Carlamaria Tiburtini is inclusion and diversity leader at Avio Aero, who is a part of GE. And I think that Carlamaria is already connected, correct?
Yes, I'm there. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody.
Carlamaria, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. You are definitely dealing with a fantastic and inspiring subject. So I will stop sharing the screen here so people can see you in a larger screen. And I'm really curious to hear the conversation. Okay, so we'll see each other very soon.
Yeah, thank you, Roberto.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto.
Thank you, Carlamaria. And I'm very pleased to have you here today into this stimulating conversation. So Carlamaria, as said before, is the inclusion and diversity leader of Avio Aero, which is a company based in Turin, which operates in the design, manufacturing and maintenance of civil and military aeronautics subsystem and systems. With more than 5,200 employees, Avio Aero has the ability to be present throughout all the stages of product life cycle. So from product design, from the innovation side, through more the operations and aftermarket services. So the innovation roots of Avio Aero are very into deep tech and are state-of-the-art aeronautics technologies. So in addition to that, they have been implementing a cutting-edge inclusion program, which has been led by Carlamaria. So first of all, I want to ask you, what does it mean, inclusion, for you? And why have you decided to embrace inclusion and diversity in your company?
Thank you very much, Riccardo. So, and thanks for having invited me to this very important conversation for me, because to be an inclusion leader is for me much more a mission than a job spec. I've been dealing with inclusion since I was a little girl, so many years ago. And I started my career in multinational environment, international multinational like L'Oreal, for example, or UTC, and now General Electric. So this is a journey, right? And there are two ways to address the inclusion piece. You can either born with, like me, with a passion for equal rights, regardless of whether you are coming from a different countries or whatever, or you learn from that. And that's why it's a journey, and it's important. It does a lot with culture. So in Italy, so my actual company, we got 8 sites, factories all over Italy, plus Poland and Czech Republic that I'm looking after as well, and also sit in the US Inclusion Aviation Council. And this is a quite brand new job for many of us. And most of the time it is together added with HR. So being an inclusion leader, you just need, if I think about Italy, for example, there are only 21% of the company having an inclusion leader, investing in inclusion. And I really like to underline the fact that my title is Inclusion and Diversity Leader instead of Diversity and Inclusion Leader. Why that? It's not simple a question of moving the words one after the other. It's a question of a serious thought and a program, which is if you deal with inclusion at 360, then diversity becomes a byproduct. So companies are investing and the picture has been changed in the last 10 years, but I dare say that in Europe, we are just talking about multinational company investing in inclusion. So it's quite a new brand job.
Really interesting. I'm underlining two things that you said, that is a journey and is a mission for you in particular. And this is connected how we see reframing as the source of innovation. So sometimes it's a wheel, sometimes it's a learning process. And on that, I want to ask you more a curiosity, but pragmatically or practically, what did you change in your company? Is more about the language, is more about the space?
Yeah. It's a big question, Riccardo, dare say. So first of all, it's not a program. It's a big part of the company. And in fact, inclusion is in our priorities. So together with financial performance, we got priorities. Every manager has got inclusion priority in their personal priority as well. What we put in place is a governance, a structure, which means that we put in place, so it's 3.5 years I'm on board. And it's true that being a multinational American company, it's easier because inclusion and diversity has a lot to do with sustainability and corporate social responsibility. But then in a practical way, in pragmatic way, what did we do? We put in place a big umbrella, an inclusion and diversity council, as we like it, gathering the different spectrum of diversity. So from, and putting in place a diverse and different employee resource group, what we call it normally ERGs, specified and tailored on disability, LGBTIQ+, women network, etc. So, and then the structure is quite like an umbrella, reporting to me as a leader, reporting to the CEO. But I think the interesting thing is that we put in place a matrix organization where all the senior executives of the company are sponsoring a specific ERG with their activity. I've got ERG leaders reporting directly to me, but then we got focal points in each site, in each location, in different areas and in geographic areas as well, but we work as a matrix all together. So everything we do it with a specific intent and objective to hit the company performance. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. And this comes from my background and learning journey and experience. I learned so far that with businessmen, you talk about business. You don't talk about inclusion is a nice thing to do. It's the good thing for the world. You talk about business. So my starting point is that we are not an NGOs, we're a company. We produce stuff, right? And we sell it, basically. So everything we do is to impact economic and financial performance of the company, but we want to do it in the right way. And that's and this is strictly linked with inclusion, because the magic recipe is very simple. If people are happy and feel appreciated and evaluated for their performance, for their skills, for what they bring to the company, regardless of who they are or even who they want to be in the future, then they produce more. They are happy and the environment is that one. So, and this has a very impactful effort on the economics as well, and the climate as well. So again, with businessmen, you talk about business, and we want to do it in the most ethical way, but inclusion is one of the priority of the company.
Thank you so much. I just underline some points. So is a structure, is a matrix, so involves all the departments, and so it's something that is horizontal, but also vertical in each department. Correct. And is related to the change also of the company. And so moving on the second topic for this discussion, which is neurodiversity. So including, I think, in this big umbrella, also neurodiverse and neurodivergent people. So just recalling, neurodivergent means that having a brain that functions a way that is different from the dominant societal standard or the dominant meaning of being normal, of thinking as a normal person. So neurodivergence could be largely or entirely genetic, or could be related to a brain altering experience like a car crash. So it's very frequent actually, because a study from the Center for Talent Innovation, which is a pool of companies in the US and Europe, understood that almost 30% of white collars have a kind of neurodivergence in their, so they are slightly or mildly different from normal people. But only 3.2% of them actually, they know that actually they have a difference. They have different capabilities. They have different, they see things actually differently. So the usual frame to see this kind of divergences is to normalize it. So just treating as a normal people, as a normal person. But actually, this is a paradox, because increased the visibility inside the company of these differences, of these divergences. So actually, as a way of reframing, as we said in the first session, and also in the previous sessions, being like invisible is something that you cannot tackle an invisible problem. So I wanted to ask you some question about, so how do you consider to include neurodiversity? Or of course, will you include neurodiversity in your inclusion program? And what could be, in your opinion, the challenges in tackling this invisible, in making this invisible problem visible?
So neurodiversity is a quite brand new science, right? And just recently discovered, and it's important that we started to talk about that. So recently we embraced this big project because we were personally attracted of doing something more, right? So I talked to you about a little bit the governance of the structure. So I don't want to say it's easier with physical and visible disability, because there is no comparison. In terms of disability, each different disability shows a different aspect to be treated, and every disability needs to be tailored and reframed inside the company, so to create the right environment for that. So we need to learn anytime. That said, I think that path was specifically started a couple of years ago, and that's why it came into our mind what we can do more, right? And also, we started last year thinking about that, because the UN organization, you know that each year they come out with a specific subject, right, for the International Day of Disabilities. And last year was that of invisible disabilities. That attracted us a lot. So the shift from that to the neurodiversity was quite easy. So how do we consider them like others? I mean, again, as I said before, we are evaluating our candidates, our talents, our employees based on their skills, regardless of what they are or if they have a specific disability. And this matches a lot with what I said at the beginning. It's inclusion 360. So if you do something specifically just to solve a specific diversity, you are not putting in place a real inclusion program, because even in a genuine thought and with good intention, you try to accommodate a situation to help and support that specific person with disability, but you are excluding the others. So my leitmotiv is always If you do it for everybody, then it's inclusion. Then it's an equal opportunity and equality, especially, and equity as well. So we are approaching neurodiversity right now, and we are putting in place an important pilot project. This is our approach. We always, being a big company, we always need to start with a pilot. So to understand what is really needed, and normally it has a success, and then we spread it out throughout all the sites, all the production sites and business unit we have. What I just wanted to make a parallel, if you allow me to, Riccardo. Invisible disability are very, very similar to, and I might be provocative in this, into different sex orientation. And it has to do a lot with coming out. So when we talk about coming out, we always think about, I'm telling people that I'm gay, lesbian, trans, etc. But actually coming out day for us is a place there where everybody can tell us and can tell all colleagues what they are experiencing. So in the case of the neurodiversity, it's important we create the environment so that our employees affected by neurodiversity, invisible stuff, they do make their personal coming out, because their performance can be considered not at best, simply because their issue is not their disease or whatever, is not seen and can be perceived from others, from a lack of performance, right? While if you prepare the environment and people feel free to say, hey, I'm suffering from dyslexia, I'm suffering from this and that, I'm sure that the people leader will then understand that it's not a lack of performance, but we as a company, we must put in place something to help and create the right condition. So again, I use this parallelism, provocative enough, I'm sure about that. But to tell you that coming out, when people do make a coming out, is because they feel safe. They feel at ease. They feel, and that's what we want to do with our employees. We opted for an inside-out approach. We wanted to make sure our employees, at least for 8 hours a day, they are living a safety bubble experience inside the company, where they feel to be themselves. They can be themselves and free up their potential. Because I feel wanted, I feel welcomed, I feel loved, if you want, then I'm eager to stay. So that's very important for us.
It's very interesting and super interconnected with our discussion, as we said before. So reframing is about seeing the problem from different assumptions. So as you said, it's not about tackling a specific disability or a specific issue. Is about a change of the company assumptions. So it's about safety, it's about value people for what they are and not from what they can do or cannot do. So correct. Really is interesting, and is also very connected to many works that there are in academic. For example, I'm recalling the book called The Fearless Organization of Amy Anderson, which was our guest at the Digital Day a few weeks ago. From me, moving on a little bit, so we talk about our inclusion is really a change of assumption in our company, and I was connecting inclusion to innovation. So in innovation is really the key point is about speculation and diversity and divergent thinking. So really bringing different cultures, different sexual orientation, different people together, because innovation is about people. how could this program, this innovation program, did you see something different also, as you said before, in the performance of the company in terms of innovative products, innovative services? So how the company changed in time when this program was implemented?
I like this because inclusion starts with I and innovation starts with I as well, right? So they are a very close partner. It's a great couple, in my opinion. So as we said, we are a very high technological company, engineering company. So innovation, it's us, right? We need to, we invented, our slogan is, we invented the future of light. So that's our slogan. So innovation is about people, Riccardo. That's all. I mean, it's about the game-changing ideas that they are able to create by becoming together in diverse and inclusive teams. Because diverse, and in this case, I don't use the inclusion piece, but diverse teams create more unlikely ideas. And the more diverse these teams are along many dimensions, as we said, the culture, the ethnicity, the gender, sexuality, disability, if you want, but also the experience level, the educational background, the expertise, and the more likely they are to draw inspiration from seemingly unrelated places. So diverse teams are better at decision making, and diversity into the workplace drives innovation. So again, innovation is about people, Riccardo. And you know, talking about the company, and stop me if I'm going too long, I&D basically, in my opinion, evangelize the advantages that an organization can gain from diversity, any kind, gender, experience, etc. But also the benefit from neurodiversity are definitely similar, and if you wish, more direct, because everyone is somehow and in some way different-abled. And I use this expression because I know that this is the expression used and favored, used by many diverse people. So that's why I specifically wanted to highlight that, because we are all born different and raised different, right? So, and again, as you mentioned a couple of researches as well, and neurodiverse people are wired differently from neurotypical people. And they may bring a new perspective to a company. So it's not just a question of making them feel at ease by the coming out. It's also because they bring many perspective, a new perspective to the company's effort to create and recognize value, right? So moreover, many people with this kind of disorders have higher than average abilities. And we know that researchers show them in specifically field like in pattern recognition, like in memory of maps. So these skills are extremely needed in companies, and especially in modern organizations. So I started with saying that we are a highly technological company and we need innovation, right?
Yeah, and we are like closing this cycle. So starting from, so I was thinking maybe the shift is really from R&D to, as you said, I&D. So from research and development to inclusion and diversity that brings innovation inside companies. And I want to summarize another interesting, it was like inspiration. So diversity is really inspirations for our colleagues, for our managers and like our employees. So why is this relevant? We just said this is going beyond compromise of including one specific category and excluding another. It's about really changing assumptions, as we said before. So the new assumption is about including people for what they are. And I really want to thank you, Carlamaria. It has been a great conversation, and we made it. We had some difficulties in the background, but we solved it. And so
we sorted out.
Yeah, we sorted out
together,
and, together. So thank you so much, and we'll see each other again. I think we will have a lot of other things to discuss. Thank you very much, Carlamaria.
Thank you, Riccardo, and thank everybody.
Okay, thank you, Riccardo, indeed, and thank you, Carlamaria. A lot of inspiring insights, and there was one thing that I really it struck me when Carlamaria said it's not just for one category, but it's for everybody, and this is a good way to connect to the theme of Roberto's presentation, because Roberto is going to talk about how design thinking is actually transitioning from a quite, if I might say, exclusive focus on the needs, the desires of users to those of a larger population of stakeholders, what you call ourism, right?
Yeah.
Or system centeredness.
Let me get to the right point, because okay, here we are. Fantastic. I don't know why this is not connected. So let me just stop sharing and redo this, so we are sure that we do the right thing. Sharing this one here. Share, and this is better to do this so we can connect. Okay. Here we are. Oh, technology. So no, it is really one big shift that we are observing, this attention from moving from a focus on one single category, which in design has always been the user, to a more holistic perspective. So with Elizabeth Christoforetti, who I hope I see her already connected. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hello, Elizabeth.
We will discuss about this.
I leave it to see you later.
Thank you, Mattia. So, Elizabeth.
Roberto.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Fine, fine. Elizabeth, a little bit of an introduction. You're a professor of design at the Harvard School of Graduate School of Design, and we collaborated last summer in August on a totally new course at the Harvard Business School called Design Theory and Practice. Before we get there, a little bit of a word about you. What brought you here at this stage of your life? What is your path so far? Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me. This is such a delight, and it's been a pleasure to watch the previous conversations, by the way. Yeah, I suppose I've arrived here in a sort of indirect way. In fact, I am a designer, and I do teach architecture at the Graduate School of Design. But my background actually is in theories of religion and studio art, and I found myself in architecture because I couldn't quite fit in engineering, which is where my family was from, and the sciences, and I couldn't quite fit in the pure humanities. And so design became this kind of middle way for me, a kind of different way of knowing through experience and making. And I suppose I find myself here today and teaching DTP with you, Design Theory and Practice, which is a course between the engineering school and HBS, or School of Management, because the stuff that we're designing in the world is shifting. I mean, historically, architects we've had this like
kind of incredible possibility. We've intuitively been creating the backdrop for our lives with all of our material culture. You know, there's this like incredible spirit of intuition, and the kind of stuff of our world is shifting from the digital, from the physical to the digital, or some kind of hybrid in between that. And suddenly the discipline as it's been traditionally practiced feels a bit limiting. And so I suppose I find myself here as a keen observer and someone who's very curious also about what you do.
So, and you're an architect basically now as a background. I mean, probably people don't know that, not everyone knows that, but the Harvard Graduate School of Design is first and foremost a school of architecture and urban design more than a school of industrial design.
Yeah, that's right. And I suppose that's kind of it's a very American thing. In design schools in the US, we are architects, and at the Graduate School of Design, we bring the values of architecture. So this, you know, again, this kind of intuitive, precedent-based way of making, but also these civic values and urbanism, you know. So the stuff that we do is inevitably linked into the idea of something collective and civic, but also very intuition-driven.
And for me, meeting you was a kind of going back to the root, because also Italy, at our School of Design in Politecnico di Milano, is basically coming from architecture and bringing architecture and engineering together. So there is a very common empathy in the way we see design, and we will see it later when we talk about what we did in this course. Just maybe again for a little bit of a background of this course that we did on design theory and practice, is within a double degree that there is at Harvard in this moment between the business school and the School of Engineering. So the students that go through this program are about 25 highly selected students from the MBAs, from the MBA of Harvard. So traditional MBA wants also to take a degree in engineering simultaneously. And in this path that lasts 2 years, the first course they take is a course on design, which is in a way surprising that MBA students start from design. How do you feel about that?
I mean, predictably, of course, I feel great about it. It's a very, you know, it's an exciting possibility. You know, the idea that these students are responding in such important ways to the triggering conditions and the imperatives of our times. You know, I mean, we live in this moment where we're designing scalable systems as designers, as not designers, as people who are designing companies. And the idea that we can work with students and do research collaboratively, even across disciplines at the very beginning of their degree, to think about what it might mean to shape the world through the tools and techniques that we have in our own disciplines, but by first confronting this issue of value systems and meaning. It's like so powerful. Actually, Roberto, I can't believe I haven't asked you this before. You know, I've read so much of your work and I'm such an admirer. I actually don't, how did you find yourself teaching design coming from I'm so curious. I mean, I know you're an engineer, but how did this all transpire for you too?
Well, you know, I can only say this thing, that when I found a little book, you know, when you're a child, you write your essays, and I was probably elementary school, and I found it out a few years ago, and one of the essays that I wrote in the classic question, a professor, what do you want to do when you will be old? And at that time I wrote down, when I will be old, I want to be a designer, which he's the person who designed cars, probably at that time I love cars. Then I forgot about that and ended up being an engineer because you do a lot of mistakes in life. But when the Politecnico started the School of Design, they needed a professor of management to teach management to designers. So I started teaching management to designers, and I ended up teaching design to managers, which is a strange stories in life. Elizabeth, but the conversation today is about, in reality, one of the things that happened during this course. You see here, this is a photo of what happened during the course. Doesn't really look like an MBA's class, and in this fantastic building, which is the new SEC complex, Science and Engineering complex of Harvard, which is supposedly considered one of the most sustainable university building in this moment in the world. What you see here is a big hall, and we were basically sitting down there. It was actually, we did the first ever class in this new building. It was open this summer. And one of the things we did, we decided to launch a design manifesto. Why? I mean, of course, we empathize with you and with the student. Why a design manifesto? There is a need of another design manifesto. Why another one?
Yeah, and it's such a designery thing to do, you know, to like write a manifesto. Manifestos, for those of you who aren't familiar with manifestos are like there's a very strange form of writing. They're like and it's like it's so from the perspective of a designer. This is the way the world should be. I imagine that this is the future. This is what's wrong with the world today, and here's what should happen. You know, it's this it's this kind of very emotional way of writing about the condition of our world right now and the way that it needs to change. And I have to admit, I didn't walk into this class with you imagining that I was going to write. I mean, I don't know if you did, but I didn't think I was going to write a manifesto. Did you think you were going to write a manifesto?
No, at all. It came out actually just after 1 or 2 days. I don't even remember how, but it came out.
It did. And I think it was because I think we live in fascinating times, you know. I mean, we live in these times that are like so fast. Things are changing radically. Technology is amplifying what we do. The things that we put out into the world get scaled in a way that they never have before. And collectively, I think as we were confronting the real issues and the triggering conditions that we're responding to, we realized that you know, they need to be confronted in different ways, that we need to have different tools, techniques, and maybe even methods and processes to be able to do meaningful things and things that are relevant to the times that we live in. And in order to do that, I suppose it felt important to get to the core of the issue by inspiring debate. You know, debate is like the highest form of conversation in design. You know, and the idea that we could put out a speculative future or put out what's wrong with the world now as a way to get to the core issues of our time and to confront the way that we might be able to make change or to design different things or to make new businesses felt relevant.
I like one thing that you said, and it's I mean, manifestos are a way to protest against the current state of things and say, how do you see the future? But basically, this is a design. I mean, designers more or less are expected to protest against how things are and imagine how they could be. If you're a real designer, you're always a little bit, challenging the status quo. Otherwise, you don't do your job. So maybe we do this also in the moment in which we design a new manifesto. And we were not alone, of course. We did it with the students. We did it also in cooperation with in the structure of the course. There was no any separate question. We designed the manifesto of design as we were going along the course. Just to mention, we of course, this is a design course. So we did a project base we work on a brief by Philips provided by Paul Guardian. Actually, I think that Paul is connected, if I understand correctly, and Richard Eisenman. So it was a fantastic experience to have them in the class. They were great, not only providing the brief, but great teachers also for the students. And then there was, we also had a lot of different people who connected, give their own views of what design is today, where design is going. A fantastic roster of contributors. I mean, it's very even rare to go to a conference and have a chance to talk to those people. They were all very keen to contribute and reflect. And then eventually there were the students. And what is curious here about is that this is the design manifesto that is written by students who are not basically into a design school. What does it say about, I mean, why not from, I was surprised, it's a little bit shocking. It should be a design school writing the new design manifesto.
No, I totally agree. I have to say I was incredibly surprised and delighted to discover that the students, and frankly our TAs as well, we had incredible teaching fellows and teaching assistants that also came from different backgrounds, from engineering and design and theory, that there was this incredible balance of, I would say, like, pretty serious technical knowledge with an incredible openness to the possibility of not knowing everything and of working through problems in a different way. And so I think the idea that we were bringing people together from these different disciplines in itself is it is the future, you know? I mean, it's this idea of collaboration across a narrow thing, which in a way design has become, that broadens our perspective and the application of what we're doing to something that is much bigger and potentially more relevant and important to the time that we live in. So I think it was this coming together of these different perspectives that actually makes it so valuable and important. Does that seem right?
I don't know. There is one thing that surprised me, that in the last 20 years, we talk a lot about design thinking, and one of the big success of design thinking is that we have been bringing design in the world of business. This is why we are here. This is why we teach design theory and practice at HBS. So that was a big success. I think that maybe this has been a little too much, and we have been bringing design to business, but meanwhile, the world of business has been turning the other way around, and we hear from many leaders. This class was fantastic. We hear from many leaders, they want to change the world. It's the first time, you know, in which you have business students that it says instead of willing to create shareholder value, they want to change the world. And so it's almost like as design move close to business, business move close to more social concern, and so it's, as we say in Italian, they're being overcome in design to the right. I mean, so it's in a way almost like design sometimes has lost their original capability of being also challenging the world of business, because that's the way you do innovation. So maybe that's why can make sense that the new manifesto come from new future leaders who expect from design something different.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I like the way you talk about that. So yeah, I mean, I think as designers, you know, and I'll be critical of my own discipline for a minute, and then I'll be critical of the discipline that we were teaching within. It's true, you know, we have become a bit introverted, and we are focusing, I think we had this artisanal way of exploring ideas of form and design that can be incredibly narrow, and I think a little bit out of touch with the cultural myths of our times. And when I say cultural myths, I mean actually, like, we could even say a corporation is a cultural myth to some extent, right? Not in a bad or demeaning way, just in a way that we have constructed it. It's a legal framework we've created. It's a design fiction in a way about the way that we want to organize our society. And design has kind of shut the possibility of that down. And at the same time, on the other side, I could say that the indulgence of the corporate myth of the, you know, corporation and shareholder value has also created impacts that need a different way, that we need a different way to confront, right? So the value systems, let's say, of our larger world, and then the way that we operate to scale systems of profit maybe feel out of line right now. And I think this is something that we were reacting to. And this is something that students came to the table with, you know, these kind of diverging ideas about what does it mean to create a successful firm, but at the same time, how do I make the world a better place? So I think you're right, and there's a lot to unpack there.
So let's move and see this manifesto. So actually, this is a premiere. This is the first time we show it, so it's a little bit, you know, a moment of finally sharing our reflection. I will start from this little piece of post-it, which is the answer to one of the questions we asked to one of our students, actually to our students, and say, so, who should we design for? Because it's been always taken for granted especially in the last 20 years when people talk about design thinking. You know, design thinking is you know, is the quintessential user-centered activity. So the classic answer would have been, we design for the user. And instead, our students started to come out with something different time around. Right? This was what shocked us. We don't design for the user. We design, of course, we design for the user, but especially we design for our better selves. What does it mean, and why were we intrigued by this?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple ways to answer this. I think we all kind of indirectly appreciated that there were a set of cultural values that aren't represented when you prioritize the user, who I think we could also say quickly, but could translate into the consumer as the target, as the subject of our work. And so the question becomes, well, how do you kind of release yourself from that a little bit, but still maintain humanity? There's you're so your work, Roberto, around this question of why meaning matters and how to shift meaning or how to create meaningful work is so critical, and it's so human. But I think we were trying to get at something below the idea of the human as a consumer and dip into something that has a much deeper cultural and frankly ecosystemic meaning. What if we designed for our better selves as a part of something bigger, as a part of the planet, as a part of the technological infrastructure, right? As something deeper that have embedded and kind of temporal values to them.
And so in a way, this idea of we design for our better self, we were trying to find a name for this manifesto, and then eventually say, okay, if design thinking in the last 20 years is been user-centered, or is it been about userism, which somehow it's a kind of nicer word sometimes for consumerism. Our manifesto was try to move away from that, and we called it a manifesto of ourism instead of userism. So this is if those who are connected want to see how this manifesto is, there is a website, which is, you can see the address down there is designmanifesto@cargo.site. You can go there and explore. We will not go in deep depth, but I think that's the point, which is written there in a very simple word. The word is awash with userism, which has been the motto of the last few years. And by doing this, design has been moving so close to that it's lost its North Pole, amplifying a view of the word as a word of users. And therefore, our manifesto, we must design for our better self. That's what we say. And just to show a little bit of thing, if you go there, you can find a better description for each one of the word there. So what does it mean for? So why we design? You can even click and look more deeply. So it's a manifesto there. Try to go deeper into reflections, and especially what is quite interesting here is we basically said you don't need to rethink everything about design. I mean, there are many things we have been learning in the last 20 years that are fine, but it's especially the big challenge here is who do we design for? And I like this idea of we design for our better self. It's not just for a user, as you say. First of all, a user is a person before being a user. So there's much more behind it, but it's not even for a person, but it's an ecology of people, places, and things. Personally, another thing that I like is not yourism. So it's not about you, someone, but it's our. So the designer itself and those who design for also themselves, which is something that typically is scary. We always try to criticize the designer who design for themselves, but by doing this, in a way, design has lost a kind of authorship. And when you're an author as a designer, you have a responsibility. So the more we take the responsibility off the designers because they design for someone else, the more in reality you lose your capability of being a human designer. You're not an executor. You take responsibility for it. So that's, I think, is also why I like of the idea of our better self. As we design for someone else, we also design for us.
Yeah, Roberto, it also just occurred to me, I suppose I hadn't thought about this before, but there's a really, I think, productive tension in this as well, which is that, and I hope we'll talk about this idea of human-centered design in a minute, or design thinking. But what I think is so productive and exciting is that we are actually talking about getting back to the individual and to the possibility of relying upon intuition, creation, and value systems. At the same time, we're shifting the focus from an individual consumer or individual, person that we're designing for, any single, stakeholder or quote unquote user, into something broader. Does it feel like a tension to you, that this idea of like where the human is in all of this?
It is very interesting because in a way it is a little bit scary, because the more you move a little back from the individual and you move to a system, then you lose sight of the human. So we say, no, we still design for human. We design for people, not for a user, which is, I think that the design is still a very person-centered discipline and practice, but in a deeper understanding that that person is not a user, is something more. Yeah. And is connected to the context around. What is very interesting is that I don't think we still have the tools to do this very well. I mean, when design has been focused on a user, we have been developing a number of tools and a customer journey, personas, all this kind of thing. We know that. We don't need to know that more. We don't need to understand even better how to design for users. But what we miss is this capability to design for complex ecosystem, which is more than the design thinking is a systemic capability that that's the reason why I think doesn't happen by chance that this new manifesto comes from a scholar in architecture who's more used to think about system, isn't it? I mean, architecture is different than industrial design.
Yeah, for sure. Social systems too, right? I mean, I think that's the kind of urbanism side of architecture that's coming through there. We can't not confront every time we put something into the world, these systems of policy and politics, finance and technology. We're completely embedded in them, and sometimes increasingly because of this kind of issue of scalability and ecosystem disaster, we find ourselves having to move up that chain a little bit and think systemically. It's interesting though. I mean, I think a lot of times in these questions about CSR or anything else, and we deal with this as architects too, it always comes back to like what's responsible and what should we do. But in reality, and what I love about this manifesto is it's not only about what should we do and how do we become responsible and relevant to our system. It's actually also about what's beautiful and delightful. And how do we begin to merge those things together to create something that is actually like very deeply human, but also not defaulting to the consumer and the end quote unquote product as the be all end all. So there's something there that I hadn't I suppose I hadn't thought about as much before, that I think is really wonderful.
Actually, you mentioned, and then time is running, so we need to ask you two final questions. But what you mentioned about, you bring beauty and at the center, back at the center again, something that design has been a little scared about for the last 20 years. But design is also about creating beauty, which is also about this, which means. I don't know why sometimes we tend to compromise. And there was one of the guests, Mauro Porcini, who's the chief designer of Pepsi, in one of our talk during the course, and was really promoting design against mediocrity. I mean, design cannot be mediocre. It needs to be functional, emotional, sustainable, beautiful. Otherwise, it's not the design. I mean, otherwise we don't give the best of ourselves. So, and this, for saying this, one of the things that is a quintessential moment in the course was when we went to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, which I never visited before. I've been in Boston for, I don't know, 3 years of my life, but I never went there. This is surprising. this was a fantastic moment. Probably for most of the students was the peak of the course, and it was not even planned at the beginning. So what happened there? What do you think this happened?
Yeah, I mean, we just walked in, and by the way, the space is amazing. This is the most remarkable room in Boston for anyone who decides to visit. It's just so incredible. And it's so idiosyncratic, you know, and you walk in and you're surrounded. It's this house museum. You're surrounded by one person's vision of the world. She has amassed all of these pieces of art and artifacts of material culture that have these layers and layers of material and human history embedded in them, all of these stories. And you walk in there and you're, oh my gosh, this is what it means. This is design. This is like uncovering the delight and the remarkable aspects of all of the nooks and crannies of the physical space, but also the material artifacts that lie within it, with all of that stuff that lies behind them. So I think it was at that moment that it kind of hit home that design is not just a product, but it's also the background to our lives and the way that we kind of remember and tell stories culturally.
This was really, really fantastic. Meanwhile, I checked and I saw that also Paul Gardien from Philips is connected and is confirming that I mean, the experience was interesting, especially in the way the student reframe. They really practice this new way of being a designer and reframing problems that Philips came with. So, Elizabeth, thank you very much. For those who want to see the manifesto, I put it back there. This is the manifesto. There is a website. You can also connect with us and contribute. Of course, this is as our manifesto. They are living manifesto. And we will connect again next August. So whoever wants to contribute and bring us further reflection, we will always be open to move forward because design is alive. Preferably in the form of a debate. Thank you so much, Roberto. This was such a pleasure. Thank you, Elizabeth. Really, really thank you. Looking forward to meet you soon. Likewise. Thank you. Mattia, we are in the last important moment of these dialogues, and it's the moment of the Michal Treskov Award and Scholarship. Yeah. So let's see if Michal is with us. And while he connects, I can introduce you to the audience. So Michal Treskov is the chairman of the investment committee of the Wallenberg Foundations. He's been the CEO of multinational Swedish companies like Atlas Copco and Electrolux. He's been the chairman of Ericsson and Unilever. So Michael's interest in design started very early in his career, in his business life, first with ergonomics, the relation between man and machine. Eventually, he became very interested in the design of mobile phones and also on sustainability as an important lever in business models. So Michal, together with his daughter, Adele, started this beautiful thing, which is the scholarship, I think 17 years ago, Michal. Is that correct? That's right. That's right. I'm not sure that, am I there? Yes, you are. We see you. Okay, but can you see me? I can't see you. Now I can see you as well. Okay, fantastic, fantastic. Yep. And Michal, what is the inspiration that brought you to start this scholarship, and why a scholarship on design, coming from a business leader? Well, you see, almost 20 years ago, I was asked for one of my birthdays, what do you wish? What type of present do you want? And then I said, I want to start a scholarship for design. And without really knowing why, and more, probably it came very spontaneous. And I wanted really to see if I could help talented young designers taking from the bachelor to more the masters and help them
financially in order to obtain their dreams of getting a higher education.
So Michael, what is your story with design? So when did you, when you've been leading many organizations who have been designing products, so something that remains in your memories?
Well, I think it probably in my first job, when I was part of learning how to design a separator that could actually environmentally separate the dust and particles for oil-fired power stations. And I was amazed that that was a possibility, and seeing how that little machine could actually obtain such an important task. And then that followed me to my next job when I was part of air-powered tools, and learned how to ergonomically make sure that those tools could be handled by operators to make sure that they didn't get any harm from it, that it wasn't too cold, that it wasn't oily, because that would actually hurt the people at the shift. And continuously, that's how it really started.
And I suppose in the last years, over your career, design has been changing shape and form. And so, I mean, from your perspective, which is a unique perspective, how did you see design changing over the years?
I think very much in the beginning, it was design for a product. And that was form, fashion, and beauty. Then it became gradually more services. And now I think it's very much processes, and you could say very much also design for sustainability. So there has been many drivers of design over time. Design is such a wide word that you probably have to figure out ways how to define it. But I think it's everything comes back to my mind, and that is the design thinking. How you can use your creativity and how you can use your perhaps education, etc., to think design and think how to solve problems and how to actually impact the social development in the world as it is of today.
So interesting. So how did this come into your scholarship then? So can you tell us a little bit about, the scholarship, and how do you see it, and what do you search into the application typically, and how do you instruct the jury in that regard?
I think in the very beginning, it was industrial designer. All the jury work was really to look at the industrial designer designing products of various quality and categories. And then gradually you could see it's broadened out. It could be textile, it could be anything. It was not industrial designer per se, and it became more services and looking, and now I would say more processes, and becoming much more design thinking than actually creating a fantastic product with its form and color, etc. And I think that it has come, that it's broadened in entire business. I think business can more and more understand that the creativity that designers and arts people have is needed in many fashion in business as well.
So if you, as always, we share question beforehand, but this is a question that was not shared beforehand, but it came to my mind now. So we are into design, so we need to be creative. So if the dream profile of a person who should take your scholarship, what if you can dream, I would love to that the recipient of my scholarship would be like this. or would be willing?
I think, as always, there needs to be basic skills, but also, which means talented, but I think also passion, that that person wants really to either solve a problem or help the world or help someone to a better life or a better business or better whatever. I think that is very much the drive with that person. It needs, of course, to be in the area of design as the toolbox, but I think it's very much having strong ambitions and passions for solving problems and actually figuring out solutions. Today's world, I would say, where we all are struggling with sustainability broadly. It's not only environmental issues, it's broad social impact, etc. I think there the design thinking has a fundamental role. But as always, if you want to change something, you need to have a strong passion.
It's I'm a big fan of the word passion because it's come from the Latin patire, which means be ready to suffer. The passion of Jesus is being ready to suffer for a meaning, for a reason, which in a way is in contrast with sometimes with some picture that we have about design, like being a playful activity. Of course, design is also playful, and playfulness helps. But if you're not ready to suffer when you face the big defeats, that when you do something new, there's always defeats along the journey, then you're not ready to suffer and you stop.
Yeah, and also when you try to translate visions into reality, all those details, those sleepless nights and setbacks, I mean, there is a lot of passion also from that point of view.
And designer experience.
But it's, I think it's not enough with passion. You need to have a foundation to build from, which means that you have to have some education, you have to have some experience, you have to have your personality. That becomes the foundation where you then can drive the passion and try to obtain something.
And here you're connected to the skill in education, which means, and that's probably why we are here for the scholarship and why a scholarship is important, as you say.
And I think there also it's important that it's not you don't necessarily have to be a design student in profession, which means that you are very specialized in design, and that's why the House of Innovation and the School of Economics, etc., is also a playground for this type of thinking. Because design thinking is nothing just for designers. It is actually for a much broader audience of scholarship.
Yeah, and this is very important. We have been handling your scholarship since last year, and for us this is a very we are proud and honored. And it's a very important signal. We were discussing just before with Elisabeth Christoforetti this new design manifesto, which is not being created by a school of design, but it's been created by a school of business. And that's more or less what is a kind of thread on this journey that we have been doing today. Sometimes the reframing of things, and the manifesting is a way of reframing, happen when you bring a new player into the game with new glasses and there is an environment that is a little bit stuck, and then there is someone new coming there and bring new visions.
Right.
So for us, this is very important. We believe at the Garden, the Garden is the center for design and leadership. We believe that increasingly leadership is nowadays an act of design. It's not something that you do in theory, something you do through the things you do, through the things that companies create. You are a leader because eventually you create products, services, and experiences for others. Otherwise, you're walking on air.
But what I like in the whole concept of design thinking is the creative part, the creativity, and then as time and business and everything is getting more and more complex, you need to have this creativity of solving problems. and giving vision and directions. And so that's, I mean, design thinking is a toolbox for that. It will help you. And I think also we need to try to get more creativity out of people in order to lead for the future, because we cannot tell exactly how that future is going to look like.
Yeah. Michal, Michael, is it Michal? We always want, is Michal or Michael?
It's Michael.
Michael, okay, fantastic. So we use the English way. So Michael, it's time now to announce the winner of the scholarship. We have a diploma here that is we still don't show because there is a name there that we don't want to disclose. So Michael, I'll leave it to you, who is to announce the winner of your scholarship this year and the motivation for this.
Out of this group of, I think, some 30 applicants, we couldn't stop thinking about Natalia Ikabara, who was actually the winner this year. And we are so happy that we figured out. And I can also read out why we thought that she was an excellent scholar for this award. And that Natalia shows an expansive understanding to explore and tackle both functional and emotional design challenges within her work. She approached each complex design question with both logic and curiosity to make sure to address technical and human needs both. Her designs are based on deep research and a systematic approach to solve the needs of users and multiple project stakeholders. Natalia shows high motivation on making a difference by consistently applying design thinking methodologies and translating problems into solutions. She also demonstrates a deep understanding and curiosity for topics beyond design, showing a high versatility and empathy within disciplines, while highlighting the impact of industrial design in the bigger picture. So, Natalia, congratulations again.
Congratulations, Natalia. We can't hear you for some reason. Try again.
Now you're unmuted, but we don't hear you. I don't know why. At least I don't know if the other Michael here, but we don't hear you, Natalia.
No, I don't hear her either. She's muted or whatever.
She's now unmuted, but maybe, Natalia, you can try choosing a different microphone if you see any option on Zoom.
Meanwhile, we have the diploma here.
Yes.
It's here. No worries. It doesn't disappear. It's here for you. No, it still doesn't work. Natalia, maybe in this case you can try to disconnect, reconnect, and see if something happened when you. Okay, let me see. So while we wait, and Natalia we reconnect, and I was part of the jury, of course, and we also. I mean, the jury was quite broad, and I have to say that it was not easy. I mean, the level of professionally of the submission was very, very high, and you will see now the work of Natalia. Natalia, now you're muted. Let me see. Okay,
can
fantastic.
you hear me now?
Yeah, we hear you. Fantastic. And the work were very professional.
Nice.
Natalia, up to you.
Okay, thank you very much for this great honor. It's really a pleasure to be awarded with this scholarship, and I think it just came in the right moment because I'm starting my master's thesis. So this is gonna give me the possibility to do a lot of field research, as I always like to do, and have a deep understanding of the problem and also what I'm gonna, the problem that I'm gonna tackle. So it's a great opportunity for me. So I'm really, really happy. And thanks, Michael, and all the people that have been part of the jury. It's, as I said before, a great honor for me.
Fantastic. Natalia, a few words about you and you're starting new master's thesis. About what?
So right now I'm going to start my my project. My master thesis will be focusing on neurorehabilitation with children with motor impairments. So I came back to Argentina to start my field research here, and then going back to Sweden in Umeå. And I will also do field research there, and hopefully compare and contrast both how they approach the neurorehabilitation in these two countries.
So, Natalia, I went to your website and portfolio. This is how you introduce yourself. Hola, I'm Natalia. I'm a Japanese-Argentinian industrial designer.
Mm.
I mean, just by reading this, I was fascinated. I have a strong connection with Japan and Japanese design, which is deeply rooted into meaning, and of course there is a part of Latin spirit inside. So it's a very unique background, and then I realized, okay, now I understand why I like that so much. There was a secret. How do you feel like being a Japanese Argentinian designer?
So I think that I was born and raised in Argentina, actually, but I still have a lot of my family living in Japan. So when growing up in Argentina, I didn't realize the value of this. And then later on, I had the chance to live abroad in France, and I started realizing the value of having both cultures. And this mix that is also like they're quite two different and completely different cultures as well. The Japanese and more the Argentinian one, which are, as an Argentinian, maybe more outgoing. And then from the Japanese perspective, a little bit more like shy. And so, this, I think, this mix of culture also is something that I realized that later on when working with designers is something that I really enjoy, working with people with different cultural backgrounds, because I end up learning a lot. And this is one of the things that that I enjoy the most, learning from others and that have like different cultural perspectives as well, and also different professional backgrounds as well.
And
Natalia, I was more thinking about I didn't know if you heard our conversation before, but I'm a strong believer in this with passion being a big driver. Can you say something about your own passion?
I think that's one of like an important pillar, I would say. I do a lot of things with passion, but also with love, I would say. And I've been, like I go backwards to my design career and thinking of like how did I manage to get here and where I am at, in the place where I am now. And I think it's definitely with a lot of passion, putting a lot of passion from my side and a lot of love for the things that I do. And
Interesting. I'm intrigued. You talk about passion and love, which are two but you wanted to make a difference. So how do you see that a difference between passion and love? And because you wanted to clarify that. So I'm very curious why you say, okay, there is love, which is not passion.
Difficult question.
Yeah, it's a tricky question, but I think it's also putting a lot of my emotions as well in the design, in my design, and empathy as well, and yeah, it's a tricky question.
So, Natalia, how did you? I mean, you've been now working on design for a while. How did you change it, the way you see design in the last, as you grow up in your career, in your studies? What did you learn along the journey?
So I think, like, when I think backwards, I feel that my bachelor was maybe more product focused and more technical, and I didn't spend that much time doing a proper field research. Maybe because I didn't have the right tools, and maybe because I didn't feel that comfortable at that time. And then that's why I also decided to go and apply for UME Institute of Design, and luckily I got there. And then I have learned so much and so many tools that I feel now when I go there, like out in the field, I feel really comfortable being around the users and the different stakeholders. And I think also realize the importance of incorporating them or involving them in during the whole design process, not only in the beginning or not only just for validating, but taking them into consideration and also like designing with them as well. Like I think in this way, like the end solution or the end product gain a way more value and becomes more meaningful.
And meanwhile, we are seeing some of your projects. Do you want to say a couple of things about this? So first, this very interesting device to, and I see that you're very intrigued by healthcare in a way.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, and that's also why I came to Sweden as well. I thought that was a little bit maybe more complicated in Argentina to keep developing in this area. So when applying, I also when applying to the school, I also saw the chance to maybe afterwards, after graduation, to be able to contribute as an industrial designer from that perspective in the healthcare area. Yeah.
What I don't know if you see the slides. Do you? What is? Can you say something about this?
The idea behind? Yeah. So this was a collaboration, a project in collaboration with FLIR, and we were looking into solutions with collaborating with first responders, firefighters, also the police, and the paramedics. So when going into the field research, I realized a lot of things was happening while training, that maybe they didn't have the right tools to train. So instead of designing a tool for the actual for going into the field and try to make their life maybe easier when doing their job, I was like, okay, I will take a step backwards and try to come up with an idea that can help them train in a more accurate way. And this is actually a training tool for to remove patients that are involved in vehicle accidents. So by training with these sensors that can track the spine movement, because you really need to be careful when removing a person out of the vehicle. You can get data when training to see if you don't twist it that much, if it's aligned when you pull the person out of the car, to be careful with the cervical spine. Yeah.
And this is another one that was very inspiring in terms of experience and also ethics, I would say.
Simple.
Yeah. So this is a device for involving the partner in the pregnancy journey. While doing research, we realized that sometimes it's hard to express for the mother, right? It's hard to express certain feelings and connect. It's hard for the partner to connect with the baby. So we wanted to create a device where you could kind of feel the kicks at an early stage of the pregnancy, maybe when only the mom can feel it, but then it's hard to communicate this to your partner. So this project was about that. And a lot of, like while doing research, there were a lot of emotional insights as well.
And this is one of the most recent ones.
Yeah. So this was also a group project. And I want to highlight this because I believe in teamwork a lot. I learn a lot from my team, from the rest of the class that was being part of this team. So this was a monitoring system. We were looking into ICU transport that sometimes gets really messy with all the cables that are tangled. So we came up with a solution to make the transport in ICU more efficient, because they have to, like nurses have to move around like a lot of machines when moving a patient that is in the ICU room to other room. So it was all about speeding and the transport process.
Roberto and I, Jennie and Riccardo will seem that we will initiate a project in healthcare pretty soon. So Natalia, we might
come back to you.
We need some consultants.
Yeah. Also because their work really look extremely professional. So it is, as Michael said before, a mix of skills and passion. So thank you very much. Michael, any final remarks?
Only, Natalia, I hope to see you soon, and the best of luck in now taking this forward.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Mattia and Carlo. Thanks a lot, Roberto and Mattia, for helping us and moving this forward. Thanks a lot.
And thank you, Marie and Emilia, for running the whole machine, and Adele, and all the members of the jury. Yeah. Thank you.
Marie been a fantastic fundamental for making this possible. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. And we are at the end. We are at the end of this event. Welcoming Jennie and Riccardo. So this has been an entire event on reframing. We have also been trying to reframe the way this event are organized with the entire team in the form of dialogue. I've been learning a lot of things today about, I liked a lot. There are a few things I liked a lot. The example Wikipedia in your presentation on blockchain, very interesting, from R&D to I&D. That was fantastic, and the importance of reimagining what art can be with a strong connection with technology, which is very interesting.
It was interesting that the two speakers, Linda and Michal, then eventually met in the backstage. The audience didn't see that, and then they started interacting. Oh, but I don't know anything about art. Oh, don't worry, I don't know anything about blockchain. But the two of us could actually work together. That's also one of the goals for organizing these kind of events.
Fantastic. So thank you very much for everyone in the audience. We saw there were very, very inspiring also comments in the chat, reinventing the meaning of trust. That was Joseph. Or reinventing the meaning of what ownership is, for example, or what being diverse is. The probably personally the take that I take mostly was one sentence from Carlamaria that is, when you deal with something like diversity and inclusion, you cannot focus on just one category. Otherwise, you are excluding the others. So it's a very, very tricky subject that forces us, especially when you work in design, to really expand the mind and being multi-focused, which is not something that design in the last 20 years has been for. So how to be multi-focused, have different eyes and look at different things is something very complicated. Mattia, Riccardo, Jennie.
Yeah.
Thank
Good
you.
job.
Thank you all of you that you are still online, and it's been a great conversation.
Yes, and I'm impressed that we didn't accumulate delays.
Yeah, today we are quite on time.
That scares me a lot. I'm becoming too Swedish. So thank you very much. We see each other next year for the next event in Dialogue the Garden. And of course, if you want to connect with us, you can always find emails and contacts there.
On our website of House of Innovation and Stockholm School of Economics, the Garden, the Research Center.
So thank you again. Enjoy the night and take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.